talk some baseball, get a little more in depth, and we do so with Harold Reynolds, pretty good player back in the day, MLB Network analyst, and Harold's back with us here on Tiki and Tierney. Harold, how you been, bud? What's happening?
Hey, I'm doing good, guys. How are you?
We're doing well. There's obviously a lot of things to hit, and I know that you guys will feature the Mets and the Nationals tonight at 7 on the network, and you can watch Harold after the game. He's on MLB tonight. You know, I'm curious, watching the Mets and Nationals for a good chunk last night as I did, it's a little hard to point out, energy in baseball. It's not as apparent as it is in some of the other sports. Can you, this point in the season, distinguish the main difference between Dusty Baker's Nationals and Matt Williams' Nationals? Can you do that for us?
Well, I think, the talent is clearly basically the same roster. I think the difference with Dusty is obviously he managed Matt as well and probably taught Matt a lot of things, but I think the players have a little bit more of an idea of when they're going to play, particularly the guys that are the extra men. He does a great job of saying, hey, Wednesday you're playing, be ready, go do your thing, but Wednesday you're going to be the guy that's got to play. So that's kind of what, to me, is the biggest difference, with that.
Well, that's it, huh? I was expecting something a little bit more. I mean, I didn't really think about that, but if it's that simple, Harold, then I'll certainly take your word for it. Why wouldn't Matt Williams adjust to and do that the same, last year?
Well, I think Matt had a couple different dynamics. I think Dusty, being a veteran manager, in today's game what happens, it's not just the manager making calls a lot. It's everybody else in the front offices and everything else. And if you have a little dirt in your spikes, so to speak, and you have a little time, that allows you to have a little bit more say. And that, to me, has been the biggest difference with Dusty and maybe Matt. I think Matt sometimes had to give in to what the front office had to do, particularly like with Steven Strasburg, right? They go to the playoffs, and they decide he's not pitching. Or I think if a veteran manager like Dusty was there, he might have been able to persuade that or sway it a different way or have a little bit of a game plan or maybe a little more influence.
Okay.
And we're seeing it a lot in today's game where the front office is making a lot more decisions, and that power and that relationship with the manager is being stripped away, which I think is really important because he's in there every day and has a pretty good pulse on the players, more so than I think the front offices.
Harold, sticking with the NL East, the Mets obviously have some issues with their staff, and we know the Jose Reyes acquisition will hopefully help them offensively a little bit. But the story has really been the Miami Marlins. Now, it's easy to point to what Giancarlo Stanton has been able to do, and their bullpen has been fantastic. But what's been behind the surge of the Miami Marlins over the last few weeks?
You know what? Stanton's starting to come on, but I think we're seeing they're a pretty good team. I don't think people really gave them a whole lot of credit. You knew you were going to have Fernandez, but Connolly has really come on as a pitcher. The difference has been the starting rotation has really given them depth and given them innings to get to that bullpen. And the bullpen with Ramos at the end has been phenomenal. But also Donnie's done a great job. Donnie's, again, very similar situation where he's really, when you come in as a new manager, you got one or two things to do. You can either change the roster a lot, which they've done a little bit, but also it's a second chance for players to say, all right, a different set of eyes and different set of circumstances are coming my way. So I think with Donnie, you take Ozuna, who was on his way out and was not in great favor, got a chance to meet with him, spend time with him, and the kid has taken off this year. So I really think things like that happen, and he's had that major influence on that team.
Harold, to me, I'll jump around a little bit here. One of the bigger disappointments in baseball is the Pirates. I mean, they're 3 games below 500. They have a negative run differential. It's almost 20 at this point. And their star player, who's one of the best in the game, is really having a very invisible season. And McCutchen's hitting 240. He's got 2 steals. His OPS is below 800. I know you know the stats, but maybe some others don't. And I wonder, the Pirates, obviously the economics are always an issue there. Is there a chance if they get a call from a team that has an aggressive package that thinks they can reinvigorate McCutchen, is there any chance that they trade him?
You know what? There's been a lot of talk about that, and if it were so, I'd be first one in line ready to get him. The guy is still young. He's got still a lot left in his tank. I think the interesting thing for me is that they all of a sudden decided that they were going to hit him second this year. And it made no sense to me. Here's a guy who's been one of the perennial players in baseball and has put up huge numbers and has been in the middle of that lineup the whole time. And now all of a sudden you want to change things up? The Pirates are one of the winningest teams over the last 4 years, and he's been right in the middle. I just didn't get that. And what happens when you change a guy? He's been hitting third the whole time. Now all of a sudden you hit him second. He's getting pitched different. Situations are different. And I know everybody's into this. Well, you turn over the lineup, it's still not the same. And so I think he's really struggled trying to find his stride in figuring out this whole new thing they're doing with him.
Is he unhappy? I mean, you know the league as well as anybody. Do you get the sense that McCutchen would be welcome or open to a trade?
I don't know if he'd be welcome or open to it. I mean, every player you come to a point where you don't control your destiny, so to speak, as far as being traded or not. But he's made a home in Pittsburgh. That's his organization he came up in. I don't think anybody ever wants to leave that kind of a comfort. I mean, you look at Neil Walker, who's one of his real closest friends. He's made a nice transition to New York, but I don't think Neil wanted to be traded either. And then after you get traded, you try to figure it out. So that's kind of how that works.
Okay. Talking to Harold Reynolds. Harold Reynolds with us here on Tiki and Tierney. And Harold, of course, a former big league player. Pretty good one as well. MLB Network analyst, talking some shop.
You know, Harold, the talk of the National League has been the Cubs, and they're fantastic. And Chris Bryant had a ridiculous night last night with 49 wins on the season. They lead the league, but the Giants are right there with them at 49 wins as well. Bruce Bochy just got his 800th win as a manager, and we joke about the every other year thing, but it seems like it's real. Is this something that they believe in, something that drives them? It's unexplainable, but it makes sense when you look at it.
Well, you know, in sports, you try to grab onto anything that's going to give you some positive vibe and think you can win. And, you know, being around the Giants in spring training, you know, they openly talked about it's an even year. Look out. So I guess there's something to it. I don't know if they all of a sudden think they can re-up or spend more money, but they went out and got a couple pitchers this year in Cueto and Samardzija. They've changed their roster a little bit, and they're playing well. And I think right now, if you ask me, they're the best team in baseball. They're playing great. And this is without Hunter Pence and really the full depth of their lineup, but they're really good. I mean, they catch the ball. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They put the ball in play and they pitch. And those are things that are different in today's game. And if you can do those things consistently, you're going to win.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the pitchers. Obviously, Medbum's been there forever, but with Cueto, 27 out of 32 starts they've made together have been quality starts, which is phenomenal. So you give them the rock, they're going to put a lot of zeros on the board. And I've always been a big Brandon Belt fan. And I remember talking to Bochy about this years ago when he first came up, knowing he hit 340 in the minors and knowing he could play first base and knowing that for a big man, he's actually pretty good on the bases, running the bases. I feel like Brandon Belt is finally beginning to become the player that I thought he would always be. Is there another, like even another level for him? I know the ballpark's not really conducive to hitting for power, but he's got it. What do you think of Belt? You a big fan?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. You know, it's been interesting watching him change his swing because he was a guy that hit the ball left center field, left field a lot when he first came up, and he's understood in that ballpark, if I'm going to hit a home run, it's going to have to be pulled. And he went from to a pull hitter to now he's back spraying the ball again. Yeah, that ballpark is tough. The numbers are not going to translate in that ballpark for 81 home dates. But if he can hit home runs on the road and drive in runs and do what he's doing, he's very productive. And now I think the Giants are comfortable enough. They're sitting him in the middle of the lineup. He's protecting Buster Posey. They feel real good about him. And I just like how they've developed. You know, they let Brandon Crawford develop. They let Panic. They didn't platoon these guys. Oh, there's a tough lefty going tonight. You're not playing. They let them play through their lumps. And now you got three bona fide big league left-hand hitters that are a big part of the thing you got going on out there. So I really like how they've gone about it. And Belt's been right in the middle of their development.
It's a terrific organization. We're talking to Harold Reynolds, Mets and the Nats, MLB Network tonight at 7. You want to catch it there? Harold's going to be on after the game, MLB tonight.
Harold, one of the early disappointments in baseball with the Astros. They just were underperforming where we expected them to be given last year. But it's changed over the last month or so. They've made a charge. There's still a lot of games back from the Rangers, who have been playing fantastic. But Carlos Correa and Altuve and all those guys, is this the level that we can expect going forward? And what was the cause for the slow start?
Well, they've got good players. I think for Correa, the slow start was the high expectations. I think everybody said he's the best player in baseball. He's the MVP, and you hear that, and not necessarily on his side, but everybody else in baseball is like, all right, you're not beating us. And there's something to that. You know, our game is so unique in that it's the only game where you can sit there and go, well, you're not going to play with the ball. You can play all you want, but you're not going to get the ball. And basically they made Carlos chase pitches out of the zone, really forced him to kind of come out of who he was. And now with the guys around him really swinging, he's settled in. They've had to pitch to him a little bit more, and he's starting to play a lot of baseball.
Yeah.
To that point, you look at Bryce Harper. I go back to the Cub game when they walked him 6 times. Basically said, you're not going to beat us. And they put that onus on Zimmerman, and he did not come through. They did it again when they went to Washington. So that's the uniqueness of baseball. And if you don't have that supporting cast, you're not going to be very productive yourself. And Altuve's continued. You look at the rest of the lineup for Houston starting to swing the bats. And if they swing the bats, they win games. And that's really what's happening with the Astros.
You know, Harold, we talk about some of the younger stars in the game. Correa, obviously, Chris Bryant went bonkers last night. You mentioned Bryce Harper. I mean, those guys are still kind of just starting. A-Rod is obviously just about finishing here, even though he's got another year to go on his deal. Do you think that there's a chance if the Yankees honestly assess where they are and maybe they sell a few assets, which I've been on the record saying that I think they should do, even as a Yankee fan. They're not going anywhere this year. If they were to find – can you think they could find middle ground with A-Rod, buy him out? And if so – would there be a team in the market that might want him coming off the bench twice a week against lefties as a DH?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I don't know. All I know is the history of what they went through a couple of years back, and he was not going to give that money up, and he was not going to quit. He's come back now and kind of revised his name, so to speak. There could be a window for negotiation to happen now to see him kind of walk away from that deal and open up a spot for them. Would there be a team that would want him to come off the bench and face lefties? Maybe. You know, I'm not sure. I think for the most part, if he's done with the Yankees, he's probably done. And we'll see him in a broadcasting booth or we'll see him on a beach somewhere. But I don't necessarily see somebody saying, that's our planned move right now. They'll make that move. I don't see that happening.
Gotcha. Harold, good stuff. Nice catching up. Have fun tonight. Mets and the Nats. We'll catch you after the game, MLB tonight. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Be good, Harold.
There it is, Harold Reynolds.